Seen in the media here in Wyoming over the past weeks, a push to re-examine the election structure in the state, former candidates and politicians lobbying to close primary voting to registered voters of each political party.
But one former Republican Senate candidate has a different approach to the issues. Dave Dodson has argued this week that a system called ranked choice voting has the most potential to fix the problems, allowing for second and third choices to count as well. Sharing a video to explain how it works. Take a look.
Can I tell you what ranked choice voting is? Yes, I think I can. Ranked choice voting is basically the idea that you rank your candidates in order of preference. So, and up until somebody gets 50% or more. So my understanding of it is that you do a vote, you rank your candidates, and if somebody has 50% of number one choices, then they're in. That's great. It's easy, it's done. But if nobody gets 50% or more on the first round, then the person who has the least amount of votes are taken off, process of elimination, and people who voted for that person are then, their second vote is counted into the candidate.
Well, we just got a little bit of an explanation there, and now we're joined by former candidate for the Republican Senate nomination, Dave Dodson. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Thank you.
So we have a little, if you can kind of sew in a little bit more of an explanation, but why is this a good idea for Wyoming? Why is ranked choice voting a good idea for the voters of the Cowboy State?
Yeah, so it's perfect for basically, one-party states like ours, because what happens is in the Republican primary, everybody battles and the vote gets sliced and diced among a bunch of Republicans. One guy pops out, in this case it was Mark Gordon with 33% of the vote, and the Democratic candidate goes to the general election. So we've got one Republican and one Democratic candidate. And if you had an open primary system, which solves the whole problem with crossover voting, 4 candidates advance to the general election. In this case, it would have been Mark Gordon, Foster Friess, Harriet Hageman, and Mary Throne. 3 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and they compete in the general election. And then you do, as the video showed, you have ranked choice voting, which is nothing more than just having a runoff. But in this case, you have the runoff, but you don't have to ask voters to go back to the polls. You don't have to pay for another runoff election. And that way, at the end, the person who becomes governor or treasurer or whatever is the person who has the broadest support of the state. Right now, you don't really know because the way the vote gets sliced and
diced.
Just
to clarify before we move forward, is it one vote, so the primary is the general election, or is it 2 separate elections?
Yeah, good question. So you have an open primary where everybody votes for whoever they want. So you don't have this crossover voting problem that people are worried about. Then the top 4 candidates advance to the final, the general election, and then everybody goes and there's votes on the general election day just like they would normally, but they not only put their first choice, but they put, if that person doesn't win, the second or third choice. And so that way you have an efficient runoff election right at the time of the election.
And I know some states have already adopted this. I think Maine, I know some cities in Colorado have adopted it, in California. But how has the efficiency of coming out with who is elected, how has that worked?
Well, what ends up happening is instead of having that runoff, so let's say that we had the general election and a conservative voter voted for Harriet Hageman, but his second choice was Foster Friess. Harriet Hageman comes in 3rd place. That vote isn't wasted. Instead, his vote goes to Foster Friess. And so then if it turned out, Foster Friess felt that the conservative vote was really the predominant vote and it got all sliced up, that solves his problem and it solves the GOP's problem. Without doing what the current proposal is, which is restricting the primary, we would have the second most restrictive primary laws in the nation, which means that if you want to show up to the polls, and I met a guy yesterday, he said, I switched over to the Republican vote. I said, how did you do it? He goes, well, when I went to vote, I became a Republican because I found myself more lining up with Republicans. You would have had told that person, sorry, you don't get to vote in the primary. Why is the Republican Party trying to make it hard to join?
So what do you say to critics who say this is kind of confusing just because of the mathematics, people on the bottom getting eliminated, putting those votes on top? How can you pitch it to voters that might be skeptical about the system?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's easy because if you're going to go to the movies, you always say, well, here's my first choice and here's my second choice, and you work it out with your partner or whatever. So everybody thinks that way. So you just go and you vote the normal way. But if you want, you say, here would be my second choice if this person doesn't prevail. So that part is easy. And then the mechanics behind it were explained on the video.
All right, and thank you so much for joining us.
Not at all.
Before we go, the election's over. What are you up to these days?
I am so focused right now on election reform. I think the system is broken. I think we're not getting things done in politics in general. It's not unique to Wyoming, and so my focus is trying to create a better system so that we get more people voting and more candidates.
And you wrote an article. Where can viewers go and read that article
You
about
can-
this?
Yeah, thank you. So DaveDodson.com or DaveDodson307 is my Twitter handle. Either one of those, or go on the Casper Star Tribune. Just type in Dave Dodson. It should pop right up.
All right, Dave Dodson, thanks so much for joining
Not
us.
at all.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.